Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for the third session of the Bison Transport Sport Leadership Series. Today's episode is going to be called Calling the Shots and Leading the Way is what our theme is. My name is Sara Orlesky from TSN, and I'll be your host today and throughout the rest of this series. One of the things that's great about this series is that it brings together inspirational leaders from all different areas of sports to tell their personal and professional stories, offer valuable advice and guidance, and share practical tips that participants can use both on and off the field of play. Notice if you joined us for our first two sessions as well. We'd like to begin today by acknowledging the land on which we work, live, and play are the traditional lands and waterways of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, as well as the homeland of the Métis Nation. We respect the treaties made here and are grateful to work, live, and play on this land. So welcome to all of our attendees. This is the first time this year that we are doing one of these sessions during the noon hour. So hope that you are able to join us throughout your lunch hour. And we'd like to thank in particular our friends, of course, at Bison Transport. We're excited to have you all with us today. Sport Manitoba, in partnership with Bison Transport, aspire to increase female engagement in sport by providing an informative, inclusive, and inspirational experience throughout this series. Here's a look now at our title sponsor, Bison Transport.
If there's some young women out there who really need some extra advice or support, I would just say keep going. That's the biggest one, because there's going to be so many barriers in your way, and we are good enough. We can do all these things.
Love what you do and do what you love.
Make sure that you don't let anyone else define you or put you in a box.
For every one person that's rude or mean or a bully, there's going to be 100 people that are going to support you.
I said the biggest thing is to not limit your scope and not limit your dreams. Know inside yourself what you can do and surround yourself with people who help you achieve those goals.
So as we get started, a few housekeeping notes that I wanted to make mention of before, and may have heard me say this in previous sessions as well. We have some different ideas if you're dealing with any internet issues, as some of us do in this day and age. If your internet quality is poor, you can click on the click here to switch stream button to view at a lower bandwidth. Now that will decrease your video quality, but your audio quality will remain the same. And if you're having any technical issues, we've got great people here to help. You can request help bubble on the bottom right corner of the webcast page, and help requests will be emailed back to the email address you provided. And lastly, throughout today's session, we really encourage you to be involved. This is really about a discussion, not only with the participants, but with those of you watching as well. We want to hear from you. So please feel free. I know some people have already sent in questions for us when they registered, but if you hear anything that inspires some questions that you would like to ask of our great guest today, we encourage you to engage on social media, whether that be Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook, tagging Sport Manitoba, and then also using the hashtag LeadHERship, with her being all caps. We're so excited to get started, so let's not waste any more time with our guests. Let's meet them now.
Hi, I'm Sara Wilson, the HR manager here at Bison Transport. Liana Osei is a former head coach of the ex-women basketball program at St. Francis Xavier University, where she also teaches in the Department of Human Kinetics. Liana is a former NCAA Division I athlete, youth sports all-star, and a 3-time academic Canadian. Coach Lee is the founder of CanLeads Basketball, a nonprofit organization providing services ranging from general sport-specific fitness training, recruitment consulting, and showcase events for Canadian female athletes. In 2020, she founded the Black Canadian Coaches Association with the aim of celebrating, empowering, and advocating for Black, Indigenous, and people of color in the sport community through celebration, advocacy, through allyship, and networking. Coleen Dufresne was born in Halifax and raised in a small town outside of Montreal. She played basketball at the University of Ottawa and McGill and represented Quebec and Canada on the 1976 Olympic team. Coleen began coaching at the high school level in Quebec, but soon moved to the university level at the University of New Brunswick for 4 years and then at University of Manitoba for 17 years. She has also coached at the provincial and national team levels. After retiring from full-time coaching, Coleen served as the athletic director at University of Manitoba for 15 years, sitting on multiple committees within Canada, West, U Sport, and FISU. Sara Orlesky was born and raised in Winnipeg, Manitoba. While pursuing her degree at Simon Fraser University, she began working at City TV in Vancouver and was quickly promoted to weekend sports anchor. Her career would eventually take her to TSN in 2008, and in 2011, she would choose to leave Toronto and return to her hometown to open the network's Winnipeg bureau. While she has covered many sports, she can usually be found reporting the Sports Center, hosting Jets on TSN broadcasts, and patrolling the CFL sidelines. Welcome, everyone.
Well, welcome. I don't know how I ended up being able to be included in the discussion as well with the two of you, because your accomplishments just mean so profound, and they go back many years too with the difference that you two have both been able to make. So welcome, Coleen, welcome, Leanna, as well. And we're going to get right into this because we do only have an hour, and anyone that's watched some of the other sessions know that I can get so engaged in these conversations that sometimes time can be a little bit of an issue for me. And I know that we need to keep it within the hour today. So I just want to get up to both of you, but I'm going to start to be Coleen with you. What made you want to become a coach after you finished your playing career?
I think first, let me say it's great to be here with everyone, and I'm looking forward to the next hour as well. But when I was a young kid, I enjoyed teaching the kids in our neighborhood, not necessarily basketball. We used to do gymnastics in the backyard and flip and do things like that, but I loved the teaching aspect of it. And then I went to university to become a teacher. And when teaching high school, of course, you coach when you're a high school teacher. And I did that, and I really enjoyed the coaching aspect more so than the teaching. But knowing that, coaching includes a heck of a lot of teaching. It's a critical component of being a good coach, in my opinion. So that's what steered me more towards coaching as a full-time career.
And Leanna, for you, what was it that led you down that path?
Thanks, Sarah. And I'm really happy to be here sharing my story as well. I grew up in West End, Toronto, and I grew up in a neighborhood that wasn't really that good. And many of, I would say all of our leaders in that community, in one way or another, were coaching or involved in using sports as a way to keep the kids busy. And so my earliest coaches were the best examples of leadership servants, and it was inspiring to me. And so I knew at a very young age, I loved basketball, but I also was really inspired by my coaches. And then I started coaching when I was in high school. I started coaching boys basketball, and I just always had a dream about segueing from playing into coaching.
For you, Coleen, when you think about your lengthy resume with it and the way that I'm sure, and whether it be the game, the athletes changed in the 80s and the 1990s as well for it, what do you consider to be your coaching highlights?
What do I consider my coaching highlights?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there are many. I think taking teams that perhaps didn't look as strong on paper as other teams and being able to advance to a national championship certainly is gratifying, and that's a highlight. Our 3 national championships, of course, were fantastic, but I think that the run to those championships is what I remember the most, and the athletes that played on those teams and their desire to work and be part of a team and accomplish everything we could.
Sure, when you look at, you both mentioned, and Leanna mentioned kind of the influence that coaches had when you were growing up. Do you feel as if you need to have played the sport, and Leanna, I'll start with you, to be able to be a successful coach?
You know what? I feel like I'm a little bit biased. I think coaches who have played the game to a certain aspect have that experiential piece, I think, really does help. But with that being said, I've been able to encounter in my coaching journey thus far numerous leaders on and off the court in coaching and in administration that weren't really players at all, but were able to put themselves in a position where they learned how to become better leaders and better coaches. And so I definitely respect. I think it's even harder because I think the playing piece, I think for me is important as a former player turned coach. But I think it's even harder in some regards because you have to find ways to make that connection with athletes without necessarily having gone through some of the experiences that they may have. Personally, I think that's one of the things that's helped me. I'm one of the few women that coaches both on the men's and the women's side in different divisions, I would say. And just the fact that I can get on the floor, walk them through some stuff, really talk the game from that experience standpoint, I think really helps me connect with players on a personal level.
And Coleen, with your experience as well as athletic director, University of Manitoba for so many years, do you believe that that's an important element when looking at a coaching staff?
I think particularly with women, having had the experience of playing is an asset. I don't think it's something that women are naturally drawn to as coaches if they haven't had that athletic experience first. I'm not suggesting that it's not possible to do. It certainly is. I have never coached with or coached or knew anyone that hadn't played, but I know they're out there. Of course they are. But I do think it's an advantage to, like Leanne said, to be able to look back and know that you have gone through it, and you can describe, explain, really feel what it's like, and be able to communicate that to your athletes.
We've had in some of our different sessions when we talk about trying to encourage and increase involvement of women in sports, that and females in sports. I think that one of the great things is if you see it, you can be it, and that idea of having, because if it isn't to be an area that a lot of women naturally gravitate to, or when you do have that benefit though of to see it, I think that sometimes, and it was something that I never really appreciated until I got older, was just the benefit of the impact that it does have when women like yourselves are on the bench or in different career paths within the sports, in different sports avenues, to be able to see it, that maybe some young girls growing up that start playing wouldn't necessarily have thought that one day they could be a coach, but then see when they see women coaching or they see women in different roles, as I mentioned, that they think that that's a possibility. And certainly we see it more. One of the things that I like looking from a sports media perspective is seeing the number of different areas that we see women now coaching that don't maybe even just necessarily involve female sports. That we see, women looking into the coaching ranks in the NFL, the NBA. So you think of Becky coming with the San Antonio Spurs, but that she's seen as a pioneer in that respect. And just think that it's something that we're starting to see more and more women of, and the doors open up a lot more for them. Leanna, when you think about the college sports and the youth sports scene, what barriers do you believe exist for women in sports and coaching specifically at that level?
Definitely. Well, I think from like an outreach standpoint and maybe creating a pipeline, I would really like to see better connections with college athletic departments and university athletic departments with the local communities, because if we can have those younger girls in those team settings, have opportunities to coach at, let's say, summer camps or clinics, it really opens up, it opens up leadership and confidence opportunities for them. But then they start to think about, whoa, there's different parts of sports media that I can be involved in, to your point, Sarah. And whether that is, coaching, but it could also be, officiating. It could also be managing. It could also be, and I find that with my transition to St. FX, and I actually just recently stopped coaching at St. FX just under 2 weeks ago, but I found that it's often when players maybe can't make that transition to play on a varsity team, that they often look at, okay, wow, well, maybe coaching might be another natural opportunity for me. I could still be involved in the team, or student managing. And so I think we can create some of those opportunities earlier by just being intentional about the networking piece between local athletic departments and the community sport teams.
Networking is so important in all different avenues. Coleen, when you think about when you began your coaching career in particular, what barriers did you find that you encountered? Oh, I think you might be on mute.
Okay. I don't know that I really did encounter many barriers. And if they were there, I think I knocked them over. So I personally, I think, I have the confidence in what I do and did back then. And I think the ability to say that this is what we need and this is what we must do and pursue that. And I always had the support of athletic directors along the way. So that, that certainly helps. But barriers, I can't really say that there were too many for me that were obvious to me.
I feel that that's the same. It's often a question that I get asked as being a female in sports media about breaking in and just overcoming maybe any adversity with being in a predominantly male-dominated industry. Said that, I think I maybe took your approach with it as well, that if there were barriers, I either didn't see them or I just knocked them down. I grew up in a household in which I used to make fun of her all the time. And I may have said this in previous sessions, in that I had a mother that always did the "you go girl," and it was just, you believed that you could do anything. So it never really crossed my mind that this wasn't something that a lot of women really were involved in. And now when I look at it, even still, the fact that there are so many more women involved in sports media and in sports game productions or with organizations, but it never, I had some wonderful mentors and just never really was made to feel as if it was something abnormal for me to be there. And I recognize that's not the case with everybody. And so I was very fortunate with it, but I feel as if, that hopefully that anything, maybe it was just my tunnel vision with it that allowed me to continue on without being aware of some of it as well. Leanna, what do you feel the biggest learning opportunities for you as a Black female in sports leadership positions have been?
Speaking up for sure. I was really fortunate when I started my coaching journey, actually, to be connected to, there are 4 other Black female head coaches at the U Sport level, or sorry, 3 more at that time when I first began coaching. And just being able to talk to them and ask questions and, what's the norm, what is it? I think what was unique for me too was I was a first time head coach at the U Sport level. And so I had a lot more questions than maybe someone who had been a longtime assistant or had already been a coach prior to and then stepping in that role. But I made a transition from coaching at a high performance prep school level and being a dine-in parent for 15 phenomenal young women. And I would say the jump to coaching at an institutional level, really, it comes down to being able to speak up when things are needed, when things look wrong, when your athletes are needing support. And that has been my single greatest challenge, I would say, over my last few years. But it's also where I found my greatest strength, because I do feel like it comes with that added responsibility of being a sport leader.
How much pride do you take in that?
A lot. And I'm constantly asking myself, am I saying the right things? Am I doing enough? I'm huge on just jumping at, professional development opportunities. I believe in the power of mentorship. Actually, U Sports launched its second year of its female apprenticeship coach program. And I was successful in this second year for applying and getting our graduate assistant coach in. And, that was a huge deal. Through the Black Canadian Coaches Association, we started the Black Female Coaches Mentorship Program. And so that's in its second year as well. And really being able to connect women across different boundaries, different geographical boundaries, that's been huge. But then when you add that intersectionality piece of race and that unique identifier, I mean, I don't know what I'd do without Zoom, because I'm trying to talk to Coach Tanisha in Quebec and Coach Cheryl in BC and Coach Tamara in Toronto. And so I really think it's the way forward. But when it comes down to it, I think for someone like me, being in spaces that are male dominated and also they don't necessarily have a ton of diversity, it really is kind of I'm speaking up and out, and getting the support is the second part of it.
I love it. So inspiring with it. And that ability, I love that you mentioned ability with there be Zoom or different virtual ways now that we're able to connect with some people and expand the group in which, either mentors, mentorees as well. Or Coleen, when you think about mentorship, how important do you think that is? Again, when you look at the wealth of experience that you have and in the different areas, the importance of mentorship.
It's critical. It's extremely important. One of the things that U Sport did, oh boy, was this in the 80s? A while ago, was the National Coaching School for Women, which I was very fortunate to be a part of. And through that, networks were created, and the environment was one where the women came in and were extremely comfortable with each other, and the exchange was fabulous. The learnings were great, and they continued to reach out to each other and found mentorship in that way. I think it's critical for us at the U Sport level to try to involve as many women as we can as assistant coaches. And that's not easy, but I think it's critical. It's a critical path we have to follow if we hope to bring back more women into coaching and coaching basketball, for in particular, because there was a time when, perhaps the majority of coaches were female at the university level in women's basketball. And then that flipped, and it's not a flip I like. It's not easy. And we can talk more about that in a bit as to why perhaps that is. But I think mentorship and involving coaches as assistants is a step in the right direction for us if we're going to have more head coaches.
Well, let's just keep going with that. Why do you think the flip happened?
Well, I think full-time coaching became more the norm in universities in Canada. And as a result, there was a paycheck going home, and it became more attractive for men. And they were making enough money. And so, they were applying. And I believe men have more confidence in their ability than women do. And I'm not saying that's right. I'm saying the opposite. But I think a female has to be extremely confident in herself in order to apply. And we need to encourage women to take that step. That is really, really important. But so I believe that was one of the reasons that there were more men applying than there were women. And so it gradually turned back. And I think we have to find a way to support females who want to have families and continue to be head coaches. It's a different world if you're a male and a female. That's just the reality of life. And we have to find a way to support those females. And for me, that's by having an additional individual with you, be it a coach or it doesn't really matter, but someone with the program who can take care of children that you may have so that they can go to practice, they can be there, they can travel, and you have someone taking care of them. So the needs of the head coach and their family are taken care of. So, it's going to take more investment financially to do that, but it has to be done. It has to be done.
Leanne, what do you, I'm just putting you on the spot here right now, but from your perspective too, interested, someone that's been involved and continues to be involved in the university ranks for it. How do you think that we get more women involved in a leadership role?
I think it starts with opening the door. One of the things that I've learned is in our youth sports landscape, there isn't really a level of standardization. And what I mean by that is, each university, and by definition, their departments operate differently. It's different contracts that are drawn up. There's different roles and responsibilities as a sport coach. So for instance, I did teaching as well as coached. But then, what does that mean for recruiting? Coleen made a great point. What does that mean if now, let's say you have a mat leave year, but you have a program that doesn't support a full-time assistant coach? And so from that, looking at things in an equity lens, I think we're getting there, but we haven't been there. And, one of the things that we've looked at with the BCCA is just around asking those questions about what we can do better. Just under a year ago, in partnership with University of Toronto's Ideas Sport Research Lab, we did like a race-based study around, hey, what are some opportunities? And where are some gaps? And how can we kind of make that standardized? And I think if we had all 4 conferences and the athletic departments really work together to establish what is the standard here to support female head coaches? Because we know that some schools do it really, really well. We know that some schools have yet to bring in a female coach. We know that some schools have never had a person of color, male or female. And so I think that suggests to us that there are a ton of opportunities, but it takes working together. It takes learning best practices. And then it takes being intentional about asking what equity really looks like for all kinds of women, whether it be persons of color, persons with disabilities, or those that don't conform to the binary lens of male, female, right? And so I feel like where we've been the last 2 or 3 years has really started to trend us in that direction, but I still don't think some of those tougher questions are being asked. And my hope is that we can get to that level of standardization where male and female coaches are paid equitably, based on the sport. Is that a thing? Who knows? Because there's no standard right now. So
one of the things that we look at with this series is, I mentioned off the top, give advice or impart the wisdom that can be applied on or off the field of play, was how I put it. So I want to go back on the court with you two. And I'm sure that we have a number of people watching right now that are either coaching, whether it be at the amateur level, be the youth level, be collegiate, or wanting to continue on with their coaching career in some capacity. What did you two, or do you two, find to be the most challenging part about coaching? Leanna, let's start with you.
For me, early on, it was just trying to identify where the most appropriate resources were. And so even when I started to coach at the high performance level, for instance, with Team Ontario, it was because another woman had opened up the door to me to be on her staff. And so serving as an assistant coach really put me in those rooms and put me in that pool now where I was taken seriously enough to say, okay, well now, hey, here's an opportunity for you to do this better. But I would say it's like identifying the resources, I think has been the biggest challenge. And I think one of the good things coming out of one of the few good things coming out of this COVID is, everything turning virtual. And so now the difference is, am I seeing that tweet? Is someone able to share that Zoom webinar link with me? I think it's made it easier. We see a lot of annual coaching conferences and sport leadership seminars, everything now being made more accessible. And in turn, it's made it easier to identify where the appropriate resources are, whether it be for me provincially, whether it be for me nationally, occupation-wise. I think a lot of that has become easier because we've turned virtually. But I still think it's a challenge because if you are not in the right circle, then you might not be getting that information, right? And so one of the things that we try to do through our BCCA platform is use our website and use our social media presence to really promote opportunities. And we've seen that really lend itself to really opening up doors for everyone, but also for women in sport leadership opportunities.
Coleen, what did you find to be the most challenging part and the toughest part when you were a coach?
The most challenging part, I think now, if I were a coach now, would be recruiting. The amount of time, effort, money it takes to recruit student athletes now, you're just one person. And in most institutions in Canada, your program, you got one head coach. And if you're lucky enough, you have a full-time assistant, but those are few and far between. But that's, to me, the biggest challenge is once you have the athletes there, I mean, getting on the court every day is a piece of cake. I love it. It's a great environment. It's just, there's nothing like it. However, that to me is the biggest challenge. And one thing I do not miss.
Did you find, Coleen, that you were able to empathize or understand, maybe when you were athletic director, have that understanding of what kind of coaches were going through because of the experience that you had going up the levels and coaching at you scored?
I like to think that I was empathetic and understood what they were going through. But as the athletic director, now what was the most frustrating there was, I don't print money. And so a lot of things, can be resolved if you have the financial wherewithal to take care of it, but you can't. So you do your best to try to find ways around it and to bring money into your programs. And that's another piece that has changed drastically is the funding of programs and the donations and scholarships and all of that piece. That's grown exponentially, and the work required by coaches to help move that forward. Not everyone is fortunate enough to have departments that are working on their behalf and bringing in all the money. I mean, coaches in Canada have to do it all, so it's not easy. I like to think I supported the coaches the best way I could. And if I can go back to our previous question a little bit about females in coaching, as athletic director, you think, well, Coleen, you're a woman, you're going to have women, every time there's an opening, you're going to fill it with a female. And I tried. And I think one of the challenges is to have us at the leadership level reach beyond our Canadian borders and go as far as we have to ensure that we are bringing in females to coach. And actually, Leanne, you spoke about the people being able to know what's going on and that, COVID helped that. And so, I'm hopeful then that there are larger networks that women can be a part of and which encourage them to be a part of that coaching world and to take that step in and try it. So I'll end it with that.
And Sara, if I may also, just adding on to what might be some challenges for coaches now too, is just the return to play, right? Because after nearly 2 years of some people had access to a gym, many did not. We invited athletes back to a return to play where, some athletes are ready to go. They're fired up. They're excited. Some athletes are very anxious and very nervous and not understanding. And, you also have to think about how different that first year experience is and how that has an impact on the rest of your collegiate career. So I would say one of the challenges that I've heard from many coaches, and certainly it resonates with me as well, has just been trying to meet each of your athletes where they're at in this sort of return to play.
I think it'll be interesting going forward, actually, in the years when you look at what the trickle-down effect is going to be from this pause that we've had in terms of athletes. That in our first session of this series, we discussed trying to get girls back into sports, and that's one of the issues that you hear about is the young girls that over these last couple of years have stopped playing sports and don't necessarily have that desire to get back into it on other things, and what that impact will be. And I feel my heart, I've said so many times, just breaks, not only for those that have seen their collegiate career impacted from it, but those that were in high school when this, or coming up in those formative years in particular when trying to play at that next level, that have seen their high school programs stop for a couple of years. And we discussed how there isn't the standardization necessarily across the board in terms of different programs for it. But even when you look at how within Canada provincially, I mean, some sports and some provinces you were able to continue to play throughout certain parts, other ones you weren't. And so I think about these athletes that have had these key years of instruction, of play, everything taken away from them, and what that will mean going forward as well. And maybe in this next 5 years, 6 years, when we see them get to that youth sport level for it, I think that'll be an interesting, bigger picture conversation about the impact of it. Let's continue on. Leanna, if you could go back, I always love, this is one of my favorite questions I think that I ask athletes all the time when I'm dealing with them. If you could go back and speak to a younger version of yourself, now that you have the experience that you've had, what advice would you go back and give, a young Leanna Osei?
Stay more connected to the people to the left and right of you. And I found that I've probably spent the last 2 or 3 years reaching back to think about those, my former teammates in high school and looking at the amazing things they're doing now. First university, I was at the University of Miami in Florida, and just the people that I was able to meet in my day-to-day interactions, I really feel like I took it for granted. And I had a little bit of a unique journey where I started in the NCAA. Then at the University of Miami, I did a year of junior college in Texas, and I played 3 years and finished my eligibility at Laurier University. And don't get me wrong, there's people that I've stayed connected with, but even more so, if I could go back, I think for more reasons than I can count, I definitely would want to make sure that I'm staying connected to those people. And it's not just teammates, it's classmates and colleagues. And my goodness, I'm great friends with my former athletic director, actually. We talk very often. And, I found myself kind of saying over the last year or two, wow, like, I don't know, it took COVID and being, locked in, I was living in Antigonish by myself. And, I had my computer and I had internet, and I was able to connect with so many people that I've crossed paths with and learned from and interacted with. And I think that alone is pretty powerful, knowing that you cross everyone's path for a reason and things come full circle. And I've come to appreciate that. And I think it will continue on that way. So that would be my biggest piece of advice. And other than that, I think from a personal level, saving some money, learning about saving before coming into adulthood probably would have helped me.
I think that's a lesson that every person, if they could probably go back and speak to themselves when they were younger, we would probably all give ourselves some of that advice as well for it. We're going to get to audience questions in just a moment, but Coleen, I just wanted to wrap up with one more question for you before that. And a little bit of a broad question, but for those that are watching that they want to try to pursue a career in sport, Marvel, what advice would you give to maybe the young women or the women that are out there right now watching?
Well, as I've said a few times already today, is to take that first step and don't wait for someone to come and get you. Take the step yourself. If you want to be a basketball coach, you think that's a career you want to pursue, then go knock on that coach's door. Be it a high school coach, university coach, whatever level you think you can work at, and say, listen, I love this game. I think I have something to offer. And how can I get involved? And, you might not be the first assistant who's going to be, teaching and doing all those things right off the bat. But if you can just say, listen, I'm here to learn. And I think, my future is, or what the future I see is being a head coach. I think every coach in Canada would welcome that and want you to be a part of their program. And so that's what I would do, is don't be shy. Don't be so female that you don't try it, believe in yourself and get in there. The time it takes to become a good coach is like anything else. It takes an awful lot of time to be good. And so you make that commitment to yourself and you put the time in, and it'll work out for you. You work hard, you'll reap the benefits, but take the first step.
There's no greater advocate for yourself than yourself. And I think that even when I was trying to break into sports media at Simon Fraser University, and remember going to their sports director and saying, I'd really love to volunteer. I'll do anything, and wrote or be press releases or different articles for their newsletter, game recaps. I said, I just want the experience of it, and really putting myself out there, which was so nerve-wracking. I think sometimes knowing my personality now, I actually find it a little odd that I just had the confidence to go in there and say, this is all that I've wanted to do. I'm going to put myself out there, introduce myself to people. And I essentially interned with them. They already had a student that was working for them. And I said, that's fine. Just let me do it. And that experience, to talk about mentorship, and we also talk about just your networking, is something that once I got in the door, tried to continue to do as well, to meet people, since I didn't know anybody when I moved out west, but knew that this was the career path that I wanted to go to. All right, we could keep going. As I mentioned right off the top, I have a habit of getting caught up in these conversations. So I will wrap this now, though, because I know that we have some fantastic questions from the audience that I want to make sure that we get to as well. But before we do that, let's hear another quick word from Bison Transport.
So I was at the top of the track, and you can just see going into corner one, it dives down, and you can't see anything else. And you just know, okay, this is going to be intense. And went down. It felt like I got thrown around in a garbage can. That's the best way I could describe it. And just the pressures are really, really tough, and they just drag you down to the bottom of the sled. You can't see anything. We'll have the maple leaf there. Nice. With our number. Or is it number maple leaf? Something like that. Yeah. You never know what you're going to be great at until you actually try everything. And just because there's maybe not socially accepted to do something, it doesn't matter. You gotta still try that, because it could bring you to the Olympics, or it could bring you to wherever you need to go, and you're gonna be really happy.
Nice. We had some great questions that were submitted, as I mentioned earlier, from people when they originally registered for this, and I believe that we have touched on some of them already in our conversation. But Dan, I'm going to start with you. What do you feel that organizations can do to maybe better support females, whether that be looking at it from a mentorship, funding, promotion of women? What do you feel some ideas could be? Or what
I think I would like to see, I'd mentioned earlier that, U Sports started a mentorship program through the BCCA platform. We did as well. We hope through CAN Leads, which is basketball specific, that we can start some mentorship there. But I think simply put, it starts from really buying into the process of opening pathways for women in coaching. I think of sports support positions, like administrative levels, and I feel like we're really accustomed to seeing women in those positions, but not necessarily as head coaches or lead assistant coaches. And so going back to Colleen's point, I think it's about buying into the programs that have existed, that are coming up. And I think leaders in organizations need to be intentional with their strategic plans and their strategic visions about buying into those opportunities. And so it's not just waiting until I get an email or someone asks me, or are you going to do it? Are you not? And I think it requires taking a leadership position so that they're making those first calls.
Coleen, this was a question that just came in, that you had mentioned the National Coaching School for Women in what your answers. Does this still exist? Do you know whether or not, or who created? What can you tell us about it?
It does not exist any longer. It was a U Sports, CIU at the time, initiative. Betty Baxter founded it, and we had soccer, volleyball, and basketball were the three sports that were involved in the program, and it moved around the country every summer, and it was I want to say a week, 2 weeks, I can't even remember, where coaches came in and we had sessions, on-court sessions. We had sessions together, sports psych, whatever it happened to be. It was just a fantastic program. And I would encourage people to encourage U Sport to bring it back. Because it was one of the best things I've ever been a part of.
Yeah, it sounds fantastic. I'm not gonna lie, it sounds like one of the. It's hard to believe that it doesn't exist anymore, given the resources that coaches would be able to draw from something like that. Mm-hmm. Or did it last for very long?
Let me just think. I was probably a part of 5 years of it for sure. But again, it takes leadership. It takes someone who has, the foresight to organize and get things going. And I think U Sport is ready to do it again. And if they're not, they should be.
Yeah, Coleen, that's really interesting, because I never heard of that program, and it would be awesome if we could get that incorporated. And the other thing I wanted to mention too was at the Canadian College, about the CCAA level, which we often don't talk a lot about, and I think we should, because the biggest difference obviously is very few schools have what we consider full-time coaching positions, but in many cases, like there's more than twice as many CCAA teams than there are U Sport teams that participate in varsity sport. And I actually think the responsibilities and the time commitment would be a little bit more doable for female coaches. But it's such a, I don't know how much research has been done at the college level. Like, we're just getting to the level now. We're at the U Sports level. We're starting to ask questions, take statistics, publish research, and so forth. But I would really like to see us tap into that CCAA level. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, there's got to be over 100 teams across the country. So just another opportunity to get coaching experience, especially entry level for women, that I think we can take advantage of.
Yeah, the National Coaching School for Women did have several coaches attend who were part of CCAA. So, yeah.
It's incredible.
You know, some high school, some university, some college. Yeah, it was awesome.
Once again, this has to come back. I do not understand how this is not a thing. Absolutely. Youth sports needs to get back on this.
Well, you know, funding is a part of it, and there are priorities, but yeah, it would be great to get it back.
Absolutely.
I could do some work.
The mentor, again, going at idea too of the mentorship idea and being able, this collaborative process of having different coaches. And I don't know if you've found this, but even being able to, for lack of a better term, pick the brains of coaches in other sports as well, and be able to utilize those resources, that it's not just independent to both of you basketball, that people and coaches and athletes too from different sports. I mean, when it's more collaborative, like
that was one of the interesting pieces was, you know, you had soccer, volleyball, and basketball coaches together who had the same experiences. You just changed the ball, right? And so it was really beneficial to everyone there, I believe, to be able to share your experiences. And we had, you know, folks involved who were Olympians, who were international competitors, university coaches. It was very high level. It was very well organized. And the participants, I think, went away feeling that they really learned a lot and were excited to continue coaching. And that's the goal, right?
Absolutely. That's one of the biggest things, I think, is that, and from somebody that's on the outside of the coaching world, but to be able to again say, anytime I find that if you're able to walk away from an experience feeling excited, rejuvenated, inspired for it, that I mean, again, it's just a positive, it can have such a positive impact beyond just that initial event or week you're on or your season. I mean, it has the ability to impact beyond that. Leanna, I want to ask you regarding the number of female coaches, or what you feel, since you're right in the heart of it right now, what different strategies do you think universities, local clubs could use to try to increase and try to get more women involved in coaching?
Well, I think it's amazing that Coleen served as an athletic director, and now we're seeing if I'm not mistaken, I think there might be at least close to half female athletic directors, or at least a third at the youth sport level. And so I'd like to see more women in leadership positions, because often it's just having that voice at the table, you know, at that executive level, at that higher level, to really talk about what those different strategies are. And some of it could be, hey, how do we look at the hiring process? What are the questions that we're asking? How are we defining what qualified means for women? You know, like, what does that look like? And in at least in regards to some of the work we've done with the BCCA, when we look at kind of different sports. So there's a woman that I met just under 2 years ago, Sophia Muhurama, and she was the only Black hockey player at the University of Toronto. And she stayed on after she graduated and started coaching. And just her being there and being invested and helping out at the alumni events, it opened up the door for, you know, Asian hockey players, other Black female coaches to come in. Other Black female players to come in. And then they're looking at coaching now as a natural progression, right? And so I would like to see more diversity at the senior leadership level in our sports, in our amateur, I guess, at the very least in our university and college systems. But I think it would have that trickle down effect. You know, again, I'm not sure how many female athletic directors there are now. I know that number has gone up, and I think not enough. Well, that would be my bet too. Not enough. And you know, one of the things that I think when we look at the work with the BCCA is we definitely want to see some more color in those senior leadership positions as well. Dr. Ivan Joseph was, at least to my knowledge, the only Black athletic director in the country. And since that point, some years ago, he's transitioned to the academic world at Laurier University. But, there isn't, I think right now there's one BIPOC identifying athletic director at the youth sport level. And, we definitely feel like that should change, that needs to change, so that we can ensure there is some diversity of thought when things like funding comes up, when things like, hiring opportunities for coaches or for varsity managers and so forth. So I think that trickle down effect and being intentional about who's at the table, I think will get us where we need to be.
Coleen, you had spoken about encouraging females to be confident, go in and believe in yourself when going forward. And one of the questions that we got from an audience member right now was, how do you battle imposter syndrome, that feeling of lacking confidence maybe while you're going in there? What are some keys that you think important for people to go in to have that, confidence in oneself when going into what can be a very intimidating situation?
Mm-hmm. I think the leaders that we have now currently have a responsibility to help those young individuals become stronger. So by our support of them, by I think making them feel that, yes, first of all, allowing them to make decisions, asking for input, sharing of opinions, and then saying, yes, that's it, that's exactly right, and encouraging them to, yes, you got it, you can do this. So I think we as leaders need to bring that out in the individuals as they're growing up. I think coaches in general have a responsibility from a young age, coaching the youngsters, the young women, to encourage them to think positively about what they do. And so that's a big part of coaching, is to bring out that strength in each individual. So, I think when I say leaders, I don't just mean leaders at a youth sport level. I mean all the way through. Maybe it's a mom or a dad who's coaching, but they are in a leadership position, and I think we have to do everything we can to make these young girls feel that the positivity in what they do.
Well, I'm going back to that idea of mentorship, or seeing women in leadership roles, whether that be coaching, whether that be an athletic director, in different capacities that allow you and to think about the opportunity be there, that whether you are breaking down barriers or not, the idea that it's out there for you. Because I just think that we don't necessarily think about all of the positions that exist out there, and there's so many different ways for women to become involved in sports, whether it be coaching, administrative, and bring a different perspective to it. And I think an important one, and what you had mentioned, Leanna, too, about having, when you come in with more diversity in any aspect for it, it brings obviously different perspectives, and it makes a difference for it. And that includes, not just from the sports world, but from a sports media perspective, I look at it as well, that it's much more obviously representative of our country and our world now. And I think that it's important that different viewpoints and different experiences are represented.
No, I was going to say, sharing the stories of different individuals and getting that out to people is really important, because you said earlier, if you see it, you can believe it, you can become it. Well, that is super important, that young girls seeing that, yes, you can be an athlete, you can be a coach, you can be an administrator, you can work at the international level. I've been super fortunate. I'm grateful for the career I've had. But, there aren't enough young girls that know that you can actually do that. And so finding a way to tell those stories so people can aspire and say, hey, I want to do that too, you know? Yeah.
Absolutely. That's where it falls more on people in my industry to be able to tell those stories as well and get the word out there about the different avenues and the different success stories that we see out there. I do quickly, because we do have to wrap up, but this wasn't a question, but I do just want to make this comment or relay this comment from Melanie Gregg from the University of Manitoba, who was speaking about sending a comment saying about how the importance of mentorship and support networks are key, which is, I know, what the three of us have been discussing for it, but she was reiterating it with some of the research that she'd been involved with back in 2007 as well. And something that we really wanted to be able to relay again, the importance of it, this mentorship and the difference that can make. All right, I want to say a big thank you because we've 1:01 Central Time right now. So this is as close, I want both of you to know, this is as close as I have ever been to ending it in the 1 hour on time. So for it, I just want to say a big thank you to everyone that's watching right now, first and foremost, for joining us for the third session of the Bison Transport Sport Leadership Series. We hope you enjoyed today's session and took away some valuable information from our guests. Whether or not it was, Coleen telling different stories about and her experiences in the coaching ranks, the administrative leagues, same thing with Leanna when discussing what it is that inspired you to coach and the different avenues that you think that we can increase involvement. There are so many great messages that we were able to discuss and stories that you two were able to relate over the last hour that we appreciate so much. Thank you. So thank you to both of you for sharing your stories and insights, and a special thank you to our title sponsor, Bison Transport. The series would not be possible without them. This session, as well as the others, as you know, will be available on demand at Sport Manitoba's YouTube channel or at sportmanitoba.ca. We hope that you will join us again. January 9th is our next session, and it is the fourth session of this leadership series. It is going to be titled Embracing Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, where we will break down stereotypes and critically discuss the impacts and effects of systemic discrimination and social exclusion. So you don't want to miss that one. You want to put that one on your calendar right now. And again, if you weren't able to catch any of our first couple of sessions, as mentioned, you can go onto Sport Manitoba's YouTube channel or on their website and hear from some of our previous speakers, all of whom have been wonderful and insightful as well. So thank you again for joining us. Coleen, Anna, thank you so much for the time. Hope everyone has a very safe and happy holiday, and we look forward to seeing you again in the